London, spring 1483. Two children, not soldiers, not criminals, walk into the Tower of London. Edward V, 12 years old, recognized by the law and by blood as the next King of England. His younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, 9 years old. They are escorted by guards through a fortified gate. The Tower was not a prison at this moment in history. It was a royal residence, a secure compound used by kings during transitions of power. The boys are told the stay is temporary. The reason given is simple. Edward's coronation requires security, and the Tower is the safest place in the kingdom. But this explanation breaks apart almost immediately. First anomaly. Edward's coronation date keeps getting delayed, without explanation. Second anomaly. The boys' household staff and attendants are dismissed. Access to the brothers becomes restricted. Third anomaly. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the boy's uncle, quietly assumes control over government operations. The official title he receives is Lord Protector. In theory, he rules only until Edward V is crowned. In practice, he now holds full authority. Inside the Tower, the boys are moved from one chamber to another, from a royal apartment with windows facing the river to a more secure inner residence deeper in the complex. Witnesses later report seeing the boys playing in a garden. After that, sightings decrease, then stop completely. From this point forward, no document, none, records them leaving the Tower. Calendar pages turn, days become weeks, their public visibility vanishes. The Royal Council announces that Edward V and his brother are illegitimate. Their bloodline, once the most secure in England, becomes legally void in a single declaration. Within days, their uncle takes the throne. He is crowned Richard III. If this were a criminal investigation today, it would be categorized in 3 words: motive, power, opportunity. Richard gains the crown only because the boys are removed from succession. The timing is precise. Their disappearance aligns perfectly with his rise to power. Despite this, there is no arrest record, no confession, no witness testimony describing harm to the boys. Not even a rumor inside official documents suggests when or how they left the Tower. The historical record simply breaks. One entry mentions the boys. The next entry does not. Modern historians refer to this gap as a historical silence, a moment where the narrative collapses. Inside that silence, the princes vanish. The legal phrasing used in parliamentary roles is clinical. No further public appearance. The wording is intentional, non-committal, a deliberate avoidance of specifics. Because acknowledging their disappearance would force accountability, and accountability points directly toward the throne. The Tower of London at this time is one of the most controlled environments in the country. You cannot simply lose 2 heirs to the English crown inside a locked compound, unless someone wanted them gone. There are no burial records, no death certificates, no medical reports, nothing. A disappearance without documentation in a royal fortress is statistically impossible, unless the documentation was destroyed. This is where the story stops being a historical episode and becomes a cold case without bodies, without witnesses, without closure. From that year onward, chroniclers, diplomats, foreign ambassadors, all ask the same question: where are the princes? The English government provides no answer. Letters begin to circulate across Europe questioning whether the new king, Richard III, has murdered his nephews. The uncertainty erodes his legitimacy. Foreign courts hesitate to negotiate alliances. Nobles begin to defect. Rebellions rise. Because a king who eliminates children is more dangerous than a tyrant, he is unpredictable. And an unpredictable king is unstable. Within 2 years, Richard III faces armed opposition. A rival arrives, Henry Tudor, who promises to restore justice. He uses the prince's disappearance to fuel a rebellion. The political pressure created by the silence inside the Tower reshapes the monarchy. A locked room mystery becomes a national threat. And yet, even under this pressure, the official line never changes. The princes entered the Tower. There is no record of them leaving. 5 centuries later, historians, forensic specialists, and archivists still have the same starting point. 2 boys went into a fortress. History has no evidence they ever walked out. After Edward V enters the Tower, responsibility for the kingdom shifts to one man, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. He is the younger brother of the dead king, Edward IV. Legally, he becomes Lord Protector, meaning his power is temporary. His only duty is to govern until Edward V is crowned. But immediately, Richard behaves not like a temporary caretaker, but like someone preparing to take the throne himself. The first indicator is administrative. Within days, he isolates Edward V from his allies. Royal policy shows 3 rapid decisions. He removes the council members loyal to Edward V's mother and family. He seizes control of the boys' household staff, the people who lived with them. He orders that all communications with the princes must go through him. In modern investigative terms, this is called control of access. Whoever controls access controls information. Whoever controls information controls the narrative. Richard now controls both. Next, he moves the boys deeper inside the tower. Historical records show that their rooms change from the royal apartments, which had river-facing windows, to inner chambers that are harder to reach and easier to guard. The shift is important. It converts the tower from a ceremonial residence into a containment space. From that point forward, the boys are not seen by the public again. Richard now makes a second calculated move. He begins attacking the legitimacy of his own nephews. He claims that their father, Edward IV, was secretly engaged to another woman before marrying their mother. This would make the marriage invalid, and if the marriage is invalid, the children are not legitimate heirs. In parliamentary roles, the language is blunt. Edward and Richard, called sons of Edward IV, are hereby declared bastards. The timing is precise. The declaration happens after the boys are hidden and before Richard seizes the throne. This is critical. He could have challenged their legitimacy while they were still appearing in public, while they still had support, while witnesses could defend them. Instead, he waited until they were invisible. Because people cannot defend children they cannot see. Within weeks, Parliament accepts Richard's claim. The legal obstacle to the throne disappears. The boys' right to inherit the crown has been erased on paper. Now only one person is eligible to be king: Richard. He is coronated as Richard III. If this were a modern criminal investigation, the sequence would be labeled as follows. Motive. The only people standing between Richard and the crown were the two princes. Means. He held full control of the tower. Guards, access, movement. Opportunity. The boys were isolated. No witnesses, no accountability. After Richard's coronation, sightings of the princes declined rapidly. The last recorded observation comes from a chronicler, stating vaguely that the boys were seen playing in the garden. After that, silence. No public appearances. No royal documents mention them. No ambassador reports seeing them. The record doesn't fade. It stops. From this moment on, the princes exist only in rumor. Forensic investigators use a term for this. Point of last known presence? The Tower of London is that point. Once Richard becomes king, the princes are no longer politically useful. They are a threat. Two living heirs are more powerful than a king with a questionable claim, and just as Richard's authority becomes secure, the children disappear. Their attendants are dismissed. The guards around their rooms change. Access is restricted and logged less frequently. This is the exact moment, according to multiple modern historians, when a decision must have been made. Not publicly, not written, not spoken, silently, because documenting the order would create a trail. Richard understands something fundamental. A king cannot be accused of killing a child if there is no proof the child ever died. Eliminate the evidence. Eliminate the risk. And the simplest way to eliminate a problem is to remove the witnesses and remove the bodies. In forensic terms, everything points to the same conclusion. The motive was clear. The means were available. The opportunity was absolute. And then, abruptly, both boys vanish from the historical record. No burial, no death entry, no explanation, just absence. Modern historians summarize theory number one in one sentence. Richard III ordered their murder, not because he wanted violence, but because he wanted power, and power demands silence. Up to this point, every clue seems to target one man, Richard III. He had power, he had motive, he had opportunity. But the case collapses when we follow a timeline that almost no documentary examines. Because 2 years after the princes vanish, Richard III dies, and everything changes. Richard is killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. Henry Tudor becomes the new king, Henry VII, founder of the Tudor dynasty. Here's where the investigation takes a dramatic turn. If Richard III killed the princes, Henry VII should expose the crime. He should reveal bodies, display records, or present witnesses. It would justify his victory and destroy Richard's supporters. But instead, Henry VII does the opposite. He suppresses evidence. He eliminates documents connected to the princes. He restricts access to royal archives. He shuts down inquiries into what happened inside the tower. And then something even stranger occurs. Henry orders the destruction of Parliament rolls from Richard III's reign. Exactly the type of documents that might mention the boys. That is not the action of a man seeking truth. That is the behavior of a man protecting a secret. Historians call this information control, concealing data to manage perception. Henry VII had a clear motive. If the princes were still alive, his claim to the throne would be invalid. His entire authority depended on one fact. Edward V must be dead, but Henry never proves it. He never presents bodies. He never commissions an official investigation. He never allows legal examination of the disappearance. Instead, whenever someone questions him, the questioning person disappears. Now the key moment. A man appears in Europe claiming to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the two princes thought to be dead. This man is named Perkin Warbeck. He describes childhood memories only the real prince would know. He identifies royal servants by name. He knows specific architectural features inside the tower. His story is so convincing that France recognizes him as the rightful heir. Burgundy supports his claim. Scotland accepts him as a prince and gives him military backing. Multiple European courts believe Warbeck is the lost prince. Henry VII's response is not diplomatic or investigative. He arrests Warbeck, then he tortures him, then he hangs him. If Henry was confident Warbeck was an imposter, a public trial would destroy the myth and secure legitimacy. But Henry refuses transparency. He eliminates the claimant instead, because a living prince, or someone believed to be the prince, is a threat. Henry repeats the same pattern several times. Anyone who suggests the princes may be alive is silenced. Claimants are hunted, arrested, executed. That is not defensive behavior. That is fear. Henry VII acts as though the princes were alive at some point. Or worse, he knew what happened to them. Modern historians point out a critical piece of evidence. Henry's accession document, the official statement claiming his right to the throne, never once mentions the disappearance of the princes, not a word. He builds his legitimacy on dating his reign to the day before the Battle of Bosworth, meaning he could legally accuse anyone who fought against him of treason, not because they opposed him as king, but because on paper he was already king when the battle happened. This is a legal trap. It shows planning, and someone who plans power that well does not ignore the disappearance of two heirs, unless acknowledging their disappearance creates risk. At this point, the narrative flips. If Richard killed the boys, Henry would use the crime against him. Instead, Henry erases the traces. Historians examining Henry VII's behavior identify 4 red flags used in modern forensic investigation: destruction of evidence, suppression of inquiry, elimination of witnesses, removal of rival claimants. Henry VII does all 4. The princes disappear under Richard. The truth disappears under Henry. 2 very different men, but both benefit from the same silence. If Richard ordered the murders, Henry needed to find the bodies. If Henry ordered the concealment, he needed to eliminate the narrative. Either scenario leads to the same outcome. The princes vanish. The truth vanishes with them. This is why theory number 2 exists. Henry VII didn't kill the princes. He buried the truth. Not to cover up a murder committed by Richard, but to protect the legitimacy of his own reign. Because proving the princes were alive would destroy everything he built. 191 years pass. The princes are gone from records, gone from public memory, but not gone from the tower. Year 1674. During renovations, workers begin removing an old staircase inside the Tower of London. It's routine maintenance. No one is searching for answers. No one expects anything unusual. As the stone steps are pried up, dirt collapses inward. Beneath the staircase, in a compacted layer of earth, workers uncover 2 small human skeletons, not in coffins, not in marked graves, just placed in soil and sealed beneath a staircase. This location matters. The staircase is inside what used to be the royal residence area, not a burial area. The tower has designated burial grounds. This spot is not one of them. The workers notify authorities. The bones are examined. 2 skeletons, both young, both consistent with the approximate ages of Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, at the time they vanished. A forensic question arises. Why place bodies under a staircase? Because it is fast, concealed, and easily sealed with stone. In forensic analysis, that qualifies as clandestine disposal. Not ceremonial, not respectful, hidden. The bones are removed and transferred to researchers of the period. 17th century science is limited. There is no DNA, no isotope testing, no modern analysis. But physical examination documents key observations. Both skeletons belong to children. Estimated ages align with the missing princes. One skeleton shows damage to the skull. That detail becomes critical. Modern homicide investigation flags skull trauma as closed space violence, impact injuries that occurred during forced restraint or suffocation. But in 1674, none of this is analyzed as evidence. Instead, the remains are placed into an urn and transferred to Westminster Abbey, the burial site of kings. Not commoners, not unknowns. Kings. Placing the bones there implies something. Someone believed they were royal. And yet the most shocking part is not the discovery. It's what happens after. The urn is sealed. No records indicate a full investigation. No attempt is made to confirm identity beyond visual age assessment. The case goes cold again. Now jump forward to the modern era. Forensic science evolves. DNA sequencing exists. Extraction methods exist. The bones could be tested. They could be compared to known DNA from royal burials inside Westminster Abbey, including documented remains of Edward IV, the prince's father. The case could be solved. Identities could be confirmed, but the Abbey refuses access. Multiple scientific requests, from the 1930s to the 1990s, are denied. Reason given: disturbing royal remains would be disrespectful. But that explanation collapses under scrutiny. The Abbey has allowed multiple exhumations of other royal remains for scientific purposes. So why not these? Because these bones are not just remains, they are evidence. Evidence that could prove that Richard III ordered murder, or that Henry VII covered it up, or that the monarchy knowingly preserved a lie. DNA testing could answer the question definitively. But definitive answers threaten narrative. The monarchy prefers ambiguity, because ambiguity protects the institution. In forensic terms, the refusal is not respectful. It is obstruction of evidence. To this day, the urn remains sealed. No DNA sample, no extraction, no comparison. The greatest cold case in English history remains unsolved. Not because science lacks the ability, but because permission has never been granted. The truth is not inaccessible. It is blocked. Blocked by the same institution that benefits from silence. No DNA testing has ever been allowed. The mystery of the princes is unsolved not because we lack evidence, but because someone does not want the evidence examined. We now reach the end of the timeline. Two princes enter the Tower of London in 1483. They are never seen in public again. No exit record exists. Two skeletons surface under a staircase in 1674. They match the ages of the princes. The remains are sealed without scientific testing. 5 centuries later, the case is still listed as unresolved. There are only 3 logical possibilities. Possibility 1. Richard III killed them. This is the traditional narrative. Richard had a clear motive. 2 heirs stood between him and the crown. He had absolute access. The tower and every guard inside it reported to him. He had the opportunity. The boys were isolated, removed from witnesses, and placed in an interior chamber of the fortress. The princes vanish exactly at the moment Richard becomes king. If you chart the timeline on a forensic board, the correlation is direct. Isolation, removal of attendants, declaration of illegitimacy, coronation. The boys disappear when Richard benefits most. No other suspect has this combination of motive, means, and opportunity. But there is a flaw. Richard had 2 years to reveal the bodies and justify his rule. He never did. This leads to possibility 2. Possibility 2. Henry VII silenced the truth. Richard's reign ends violently. Henry Tudor takes the throne. If Richard murdered the boys, Henry had every incentive to expose it. He could prove his predecessor was a child killer. He could delegitimize every faction supporting Richard. Yet Henry chooses silence. He destroys records. He removes documents relating to the princes. He executes anyone claiming to be a surviving prince. When a man named Perkin Warbeck appears and claims to be Richard, Duke of York and the younger prince, Europe believes him. Henry executes him anyway. Not disprove, not investigate, eliminate. From a forensic standpoint, that behavior matches witness suppression. When a king destroys potential evidence and eliminates claimants, silence becomes intentional, not accidental. Some historians believe Henry discovered the truth, possibly even discovered the bodies, and hid the evidence because acknowledging a murder would destabilize his dynasty. Because if the princes died under Richard's rule, Henry gains legitimacy. But if the princes were alive when Henry became king, Henry becomes the person with the most to lose. This brings us to the final theory. Possibility 3. One prince escaped. There are no records confirming both boys died, only that they disappeared. If one escaped, the existence of a living prince would threaten every monarch who came after. Henry VII's extreme reaction to Perkin Warbeck makes more sense under this interpretation. The panic, the executions, the destroyed documents. If a surviving prince existed, even as rumor, the Tudor dynasty would be built on fraud. A government can handle scandal. It cannot survive illegitimacy. Even today, the possibility of escape remains statistically viable because no one has ever been allowed to test the bones found in the tower. Modern DNA sequencing could confirm or disprove the theory, but the monarchy continues to deny permission, not because science lacks the tools, but because answers create risk. Uncertainty protects power. 3 possibilities remain. Richard III killed them. Henry VII buried the truth. 1 prince escaped. The disappearance of Edward V and his brother is not just a historical mystery, it is a controlled absence of information, a silence that serves someone. Which is more frightening, that 2 princes were murdered, or that their killer still has not been revealed?